Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Dean and I am the Research Chair for Marshy Point Nature Center Council, and today you're joining me in the Research Chair. Bring forth their voices. Judah, Lennon, Tamar, Phyllis, Bristow, Gemini, Kate, Phoebe, Short Kate, Nell, Sam, Harry, Phil, Bristol, Bishop, and Jenny. These are only some of the names of the enslaved who would have lived and possibly passed away in the Marshy Point region. William Bond began acquiring land in Marshy Point as early as 1734 with a portion of Forbury Neck from Peregrine Frisbee, HWSM, page 43. He also purchased part of the same land patent of Forbury Neck from his cousin Barnett Bond in 1741, HWSIA, page 514. In 1742, he purchases part of Filial Care from William Andrews in book TBC, page 177. He later has these patents resurveyed and put under his name. This begins the transition of William Bond moving towards Marshy Point rather than the lands that his father left him, Thomas Bond of Emerton. Some of William Bond's children inherit this land as others move away. When we look at the historical land of what was considered Marshy Point, we see 4 land patents issued by Lord Baltimore, and later on these were issued by the state of Maryland. The names given by the landowners were Bond's Neck, James' First Attempt, Nicholson's Discovery, and Midsummer Hills. Parts of these 4 large land patents more or less being the property known also as Marshy Point. This description carried through with the mention of Cassandra Bond, who was bequeathed this land from her father, William Bond. These 4 land patents, which comprise what was Marshy Point, are with different people, and they were patented over a period of time. You can see with Bond's Neck that was patented in 1757 with William Bond. William Bond also had Midsummer Hills in 1745. Now you can see a Nathan Nicholson for Nicholson's Discovery with a patent from 1770, and a James Bond with the land patent for James' First Attempt in 1782. Now, Nathan Nicholson was the husband of Ruth Bond, one of William Bond's daughters, and James Bond was one of William Bond's sons. We can visually see the 4 land patents and where they're located thanks to map-maker.org and the work of Mike Pierce, who has since passed away, as it's transferred over to Google Earth. Those are the 4 land patents. You can see Marshy Point Nature Center lands basically in the center of Bond's Neck, Midsummer Hills, and James' First Attempt. I initially spoke of William Bond acquiring land in 1734 with the property of Forbury Neck. You could see visually Forbury Neck and Filial Care were eventually resurveyed and put into Bond's Neck in 1757. You can also see the transition of Midsummer Hill over time as it took little bits and pieces away from different other land patents as well to become the Midsummer Hills of William Bond in 1745. Nicholson's Discovery is slightly northeast of the other land patents and runs a little further up what is today's Eastern Avenue. Lastly, you could see James' First Attempt, who was patented by James Bond, the son of William Bond, later on in 1782. So the area of historic Marshy Point and the dates of the transition of William Bond moving to the Marshy Point area are relevant in this sense, as prior to Cassandra Bond's birth, she was born in 1749, and the main reason why any of this research has been made possible is because of the one stone that has her name on it has survived over all of these years. Prior to her birth, William Bond gifts his children an enslaved child who would grow up with them and become their legal inventory. The enslaved were to be delivered at the day of marriage, or 16 years old for the Bond girls, or delivered at the day of marriage, or 21 years old for the boys. The youngest gift was a little girl about 2 years old to William Bond's son Tobias. You could see each of the Bond children and who they were expected to receive. We start out with Ruth Bond, who is expected to receive Judah, about 14 years old and female. Luke Stansbury Bond was to receive Lennon, about 12 years old and male. Priscilla Bond was to receive Tamar, about 10 years old and female. Elizabeth Bond was to receive Phyllis, about 4 years old and female. Thomas Bond was to receive Bristow, about 8 and male. William Bond was to receive Gemini, about 6 and male. And Tobias Bond was to receive Kate, about 2 years old and female. All of the Bond children were roughly around the same age as the enslaved child they were to receive. Let's take a look at roughly 40 years from that period to 1783, the tax record listing, which now has Cassandra, her mother Elizabeth, and her brother James. Many of their siblings have either passed away or are located elsewhere, and William Bond has passed away at this point as well. So essentially, to make it easier to read, I've broken it down into the different sections and have also added on their brother Luke Bond, who has no property names listed. However, we do know that he eventually ended up on another property that his father left him that was outside of Marshy Point. Now, looking over this chart, you'll see Cassandra was taxed on a female between the ages of 14 and 36. A male or female between the ages of 8 and 14, and 2 children, either male, female, or a mixture of the two, under 8 years old. We don't know the relationship between the female, ages 14 to 36, and the children. I have Luke Bond listed on here. Not sure which property his enslaved would have been on at this point in time. There is no taxable land mentioned. However, the Lennon that was listed from childhood is not listed on the 1783 tax record, as he would have fit into the male range, 12 plus those close to 40 years. So he does have a few enslaved, but it does not look like Lennon is listed there. Now, Cassandra, Luke, and James's mother, Elizabeth, has one male between the ages of 14 and 45, and then she has a male either over 45 or a female over 36. We do not know if any of the enslaved changed hands between the children and their siblings or their parents either. Now, what we do see for Elizabeth as well is she has 2 enslaved, and one has a note with them that one hand is disabled. We don't know if that is a physical hand, as if they had a hand injury, or if it meant them as a field or worker in reference to hand. Something to note is, in this instance, Elizabeth was taxed less money because of the disabled hand that is referenced here. So they were less valuable in the eyes of the tax collection. Lastly, we have James Bond, who had property names of Bond's Neck, part of that, Andrew's Neglect, part of Limerick, Nicholson's Discovery. With these lands, there was an acreage of 418 acres. He had 2 males between the ages of 14 to 45, and that is all of the ones listed in the tax record for 1783. What we can kind of deduce from this is the extent of their working abilities. These were not plantations like you would think in the South. The amount of enslaved for each one of these people seemed to be the type you would have for cooks and helpers and carriage drivers, compared to multiple enslaved out in a field working for production purposes and financial purposes. So I've made note at the bottom of this slide. These slides were actually used in a presentation for the symposium the Archaeological Society of Maryland hosted at the Maryland Historical Trust last year. But I made note of two names, Harry and Kate. These are two names that transfer over from a few different records. These names are also listed in Elizabeth's inventory of 1787, a few years after this tax record. Another name that shows up as a possibility is Bristol, and is suspected to be one of the males in the age range of 8 to 14, as he was listed as a boy in 1787. So some of these names carry over, and Harry and Kate are two of them where they seem to be long-term with the family. So we'll go into that into more detail now. You can see in the inventories, which were created after the deaths of people to evaluate how many assets they had, we did luck out at Marshy Point, where some names were listed, ages were listed. We got information to compile and be able to build up a little bit more information than we normally would. You can see not the full picture on this one, as we've discussed separately, the 1783 tax records, but this is a re-looking at the gifts of the enslaved children from William Bond to his children, along with the inventory information we were able to get for William Bond and Elizabeth Bond. You'll see some of the names highlighted that I mentioned before, such as Kate and Harry, and you can kind of track through the document date, the age estimated of each of them at their time of the documents being written, and their relationship to the people, where they fit in. One of the incredible things is with the Kate that they designated between two separate Kates, one as a Kate and one as a short Kate. One of them matches up as the Kate that would have been 2 years old in 1745, who has now grown up. We don't know if there's a relation between the two Kates, whether it's a mother-daughter, siblings, cousins, anything. And we hope to delve deeper into these topics as we continue on the journey. We're happy to have this information, but and as much as we wanted to present some of it for Black History Month, one of the things to consider is it shouldn't just be for Black History Month. These people lived and worked at Marshy Point, and their voices have been silent due to the neglect of record keeping, the neglect of being viewed as important during this time period, where they show up as inventory compared to in records for what you would normally expect for people of that time period, for purchasing properties, for transactions, other legal issues, for anything. So we want to make sure that they're not forgotten in the mix of everything else that has been visible to this point. One of the things I want to address is the what's brought up in many of the 18th century cemetery tours that I give at Marshy Point. And a lot of people ask, are enslaved buried in the cemetery? So with that, for those who don't know, there has been one artifact, large artifact, with information that has been left from the 18th century, and it is the headstone and footstone of Cassandra Hamilton. Cassandra's married name was Hamilton, and her father was William Bond. If these items didn't exist, there would have been only woods, and there wouldn't have been any incentive or interest into looking into the lives, neither the landowners' lives nor the enslaved. So I am grateful that the headstone, footstone, along with a couple of field stones have been in place and haven't been removed over the centuries, as they were the catalyst to researching. So we have 17 probable and 9 possible grave shafts in total, per a ground-penetrating radar survey conducted by the Maryland Historical Trust's Office of Archaeology. This is the information we have. We do not know who is buried. We don't know who's in the graves, nor could we verify it without exhuming those graves. So we don't know who would be buried there at this point in time. Compared to famous people or well-known people, we also don't have personal accounts of who these people were and how they treated each other. What is common is subjective opinions based on assumptions. People tend to romanticize their ancestors on the bias of who they are today and can villainize others. Take, for instance, Cassandra. We can ask questions like, since she does not appear to have offspring who survive in the written record so far, did she view the enslaved children in the 1783 tax record as her own family, as her own children? This is an extreme romanticized view using personal opinion, what you might hope she would do. On the extreme opposite end, did she consider those children food and supply burdens, as there is evidence that her family were in financial burdens, and did she treat them poorly, using them the most she could to their abilities? The bottom line is, we don't know Cassandra as much as we want to know who she is and who the person is buried there, except for what is historically factual. Thus, when you visit our cemetery, consider her headstone not just the marker for her burial. It has now taken on a different role in history, a more important role than just a remaining artifact for one person. It now represents everyone who lived and died at Marshy Point. This headstone in the middle of the woods represents the people who made the stone, the people who dug the grave, the people who kept and cleared that cemetery during that time period, those who carried her body and every single other person's body in that full cemetery. This one stone, as it's the only thing that remains aside from a couple field stones, it has now taken on the role of representing everybody in that cemetery, everybody who kept that cemetery, everybody who worked there and maintained that area. So keep that in mind as you visit, as much as we want to create a story around a historical person, we don't have that information, so we can't place any made-up context or assumptions. It would be wrong of us to subjectively put in personal opinions on the matter. We have our own personal opinions. We have our hopes of who she would have been, who all the other people would be, but we don't know. Our goal is to try and equally keep the history of those who didn't have as loud of a voice that has resonated in history as the people who had their name rewritten and rewritten and rewritten because they were the ones making the transactions, making the decisions over others. We want to bring a voice to the people who have been silent all these years and not forget about them. As this is being posted and created during Black History Month, I highly recommend you go on the Marshy Point Facebook page and take a look at the post from last year. It is a tribute to the families that started coming in and owning property as early as the 1870s during the boom and the need for work on the railroad that was maintained over by Marshy Point. And the families that stem from there, we still have living descendants from those families who are willing to talk with us, and we hope to continue and start recording an oral history from those families. So please check that out. You could see the post here, and be sure to like and follow Marshy Point Nature Center's Facebook page. And I look forward to creating more informative videos for the public to listen to. Feel free to reach out with any comments or opinions. Thank you.